This is a lesson on triage, on how to improve your ability to take tests. We're going to start with a short quiz. So when I flip the slide, you'll have 30 seconds to answer as many questions as you can. Go. And now the answer is listed in red. So how did you do? As you look at the questions and the answers, do you notice how some are significantly easier than others? Figuring out how to solve the easiest problems first will be the focus of today's lesson, which is on triage. In other words, the process of determining the most important test questions and solving them first. To get started with a short history, triage was originally used by medical units in wartime as they tried to figure out which patients to treat first. For example, if two patients come into a clinic at the same time, one of them's got a gunshot wound, one of them's got a headache, they're probably going to treat the gunshot wound first because it could be a life or death situation. So triage is the process of determining which patients to treat first when we're talking about healthcare. In the context of test taking, triage refers to prioritizing work and time with respect to problem difficulty, or more simply stated, solving the easiest problems first. Triage can be challenging though because test questions are not always in order of difficulty. The GAIN test, which all e-learning students took during orientation, is unique in that way because it is listed from easiest to hardest. But most tests, like the HiSET, the GED, the SAT, the ACT, the Compass test, are not listed in order of difficulty. So, for example, if we're trying to solve the easiest problems first, we can't necessarily just go 1 through 45. Or a more specific example, we can look at these 3 problems. Notice how we can't immediately tell which is the easiest problem. Or if we look back at the original example, we can't necessarily assume that the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th are going to be ordered from easiest to hardest. Triage is also challenging because the process of determining which is the easiest and which is the hardest takes time. So in other words, we don't want to waste time worrying about a problem because we could be using that time to solve the problem. So, how do we know when we're going to solve a problem and when we're not going to? But first, a short animation that I just learned how to make in PowerPoint. And next, let's talk through a few assumptions to make sure this lesson is logical. So first of all, the time to finish a test is finite. In other words, we don't have unlimited time. Second, a test consists of a finite number of problems. In other words, there are a specific number that we need to solve. Number 3, and arguably the most important assumption, is that some problems are easier than others, but all problems are worth the same amount. So we need to always recognize that every problem is equal in points. Lastly, you're more likely to correctly solve easy problems than hard problems. So with that, we draw the conclusion that you will achieve the highest score if you solve problems in order of difficulty, from easiest to hardest, because we will solve more problems and hopefully get more problems correct. So in order to do this, when you take a test, you should read every question once. If you know how to do the problem, solve it now. Don't waste time thinking about it, just get started and solve it as quickly as you can. If you're not sure how to do it after you read it once, then skip it, mark it, and solve it later. So don't waste 30, don't waste 40, don't waste 5, waste a full minute worrying about if you're going to solve a problem. Just mark it and solve it later. So we can kind of simply boil it down to a quote of, will I solve it now or will I solve it later? Ask this of yourself every time you read a question. So, you'll read through all the questions once, you'll probably solve about half of them, and then when you finish, then do a second pass, attacking each of the later problems. So for example, looking at number 1, if you put an answer but weren't sure of it, check it again. You might see a mistake or realize the solution. Then, if you didn't put an answer for a problem, but you realize how to do the problem, go ahead and do it. And lastly, if you're still not sure how to do a problem, you've marked it, you've come back to it, you've reviewed it, just give it your best shot and make an educated guess. And And that last one kind of talks about this slide, which is if you haven't read or answered a problem at the end of the test, it's no big deal. Just don't leave it blank. A lot of students get to the end of the test and are nervous that they haven't finished, and it's okay. You might not read every question, you might not solve every question, but most importantly, don't leave it blank. You can still pass a test even if you don't answer every question. And remember, a blank answer is a wrong answer, so you might as well take a guess. And typically, like you can see in the second and third bullets, you should pick one letter. So just bubble all A's, all B's, all C's, or all D's, because with that strategy, you should get about 1/4 of them right, statistically. So, short review. With every question, ask yourself, are you going to solve it now or solve it later? For the problems that you know how to do, solve it. Don't spend time thinking about it, just get started and solve as quickly as you can. For questions that you're not sure of immediately, just mark it and move on. So in other words, if you see a problem and you're not sure how to do it, don't spend more than 5 or 10 seconds on it. Just mark it and then come back to it later. And lastly, remember, triage isn't cheating. It's just being strategic with how you spend your time on a test. So to finish, I'm going to give you the same quiz I gave you at the start, and again, give you 30 seconds. Try this idea of triage. With every question, are you going to solve it now or solve it later? 30 seconds. Go. So with question 1, it's a longer word problem. There's a couple variables. I'd probably mark it. Question 2, straightforward addition. Solve it now. Question 3, again, a multivariable word problem. Mark it, solve it later. Question 4, straightforward. Question 5 and 6, subtraction. And at this point, we're out of 30 seconds, but hopefully you've seen now that the first time you took the quiz, maybe you got 1 or 2 right. This time you should have gotten at least 4 right, and you might have time to go back and solve those longer word problems. So with triage, every time you take a test, ask yourself, will I solve it now? Will I solve it later? Mark it if you're going to solve it later, and then come back later if you do have time. This is Triage. Good luck with any standardized test you're taking, and thanks.